welcome to another episode of the Silver Track Extra, where we give you the tools, tips, and tricks to improve your guard management, retain more customers, and gain the upper hand against your competitors. Here are your hosts, Chris Anderson and Johnny Page.
What's up, Silver Track Nation? Johnny Page here and Chris Anderson on yet another episode of the Silver Track Extra. Chris, we are tackling episode number 89, which is a long ways away from episode number 1. I remember how nervous I was on episode number 1. I think you and I were both nervous. It's just...
I can't believe it's 89. That's incredible.
Yeah, and we were listening to the first recording and we're like, oh my gosh, do I talk like that? Are you serious?
Oh, no, man, I wish we could delete one.
Now we're used to how...
Now, you know what's going to happen? Everybody's going to go listen to episode 1 now.
Yeah, you have to scroll a long ways back. In fact, I encourage you, go to the archives. There is a ton of good information in there. I wish we had a better way of resurfacing all of our really good posts. We should have a wall of fame where we have our top 10 posts or something like that, because
but we've learned a lot though, right?
We started out, in fact, if you go back to episode number 1, they're long. They're like an hour and 20 minutes, and they were more interview styles, which I enjoy interviews for sure as a good way to break it up, but I like the 20-minute 10, 15-minute episodes a little bit more. I think our audience does too, or at least our numbers reflect that. So anyways, back to business. We're tackling in number 89. We're going to answer the question, do performance reviews and post-inspections really matter? And this is all in the spirit of a new ebook that we actually released probably about 2 weeks ago by the time this airs, on evaluating security officer performance and understanding what are some of the things that we should be measuring. Is it important to measure? What's a good process for measuring? All really coming down to really the foundation for that is, do performance reviews or post-inspections matter? So Chris, tell me, what do you think? Do you think a lot of companies out there are doing performance reviews or some sort of post-inspection for their officers?
Well, we all claim to do performance reviews and post-inspections. That's part of our pitch, right? And I'm going to talk more on the lines of kind of medium-sized type security companies. What would you think? What would you consider medium? 100, 150, guards?
I think our mid-level, 250 or less, I would say.
250 or less, or even some of the smaller guys that are listening to our podcast today. We pitch that, but the problem is we really can't get the supervision around to all the accounts to visit. We don't have the money to go out and put 4 or 5 supervisors to maintain this. And then on top of that, if you're doing any kind of paperwork at all, unless you're walking with a guy, you don't know what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
And, he's writing, you don't know. So that's where, I got together and we put this program together and the software together to help these guys with this so you can do it electronically. But again, it's all about how you set up your thing. So as much as we really want to do them, I don't think we're doing it well.
Yeah, I think to further emphasize your point, you were talking about if you have a software in place, you can see performance metrics without having to go there.
Yeah, but right, as John, a lot of guys aren't even using it for that. They're just, like a patrol check. You can't evaluate performance. Well, you're just seeing that he did something, right?
Yeah, I mean, even having a tool that allows you to see, so when someone's writing a report, you can look like the best officer in the world on the written report. But when you actually when it's timestamped for when you actually make the entry, and there's GPS information, and you can include photos, and we can see what's your activity level as an officer over long periods of time, then we kind of know without having to, we're not when you're sending an officer on site or a supervisor on site, you're rolling the dice hoping that the one time I'm checking is the one time this guard is sleeping, right? Or isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. But you're just randomizing. And really, here's the one I love, Chris. Yes, we have supervisors in the field, but they just so happen to be the same guys who are doing all of our patrols and all of our alarm responses. So by the end of the shift, if they're lucky enough to have had 5 minutes to drive to one of our posts and actually do an inspection of the officer, they're probably going to take that 5 minutes to grab a bite to eat or run through the Burger King drive-through because it's 5 minutes to breathe, right? So.
Yeah, and we all know that. And you know what? And the clients know that. Yeah, the clients know that. Anybody that's been in the industry or that's been, hiring guard services, they know that. So it's hard to hide. And
so I think that there is this, you asked a great question, which I think is an awesome lead into really why performance reviews and post-inspections do matter. When you're a 100 guard company, probably doesn't matter, right? Because chances are you're going to be small enough to know when a guard isn't doing a good job. You can see every report. You can know every officer for the most part. You know, maybe you don't know them all on a first name basis, but you have some understanding of who your guards are. When you get 150 guards, 175, 200, now post inspections really do matter, because you're not going to get to 250 officers and be a janky, low run-of-the-mill security company. You're not going to get to 300. You're not going to get to 400 unless you're actually doing something right. And you can't do something right unless you have quality assurance in place on a consistent basis. You're just going to lose too many contracts. It'll be one contract in, one contract out. You know, so...
Yeah, because performance reviews are eventually going to run into client performance reviews. Okay, let's just call it that, right? For today's purpose. So clients, when in question or question your services, you need to be able to pull up your own performance reviews and show that to the clients what you're doing as far as post inspections, what you're doing to solve the issues at that contract. And if you can pull performance reviews to show them that the guys are doing their job, that you're doing a good job, that's going to save a contract.
Well, and see, here's something I hear people say, well, I don't really, we don't have anything like that in place because we have a great reputation. And here's my response to that. It is not your reputation that causes that customer to question you. It's the industry's reputation that causes the customer to question you.
Johnny.
So it doesn't have to just be you that has had a reputation of your guards not showing up. It's the service provider before you. Or just, that their friend has a guard company, or has their friend that's a property manager had a company who found their officer, sleeping on the job or not even showing up. It's those stories that seem to circulate a dime a dozen that actually cause you to have to be able to provide that information. So even if you're doing a great job, you need to prove that you're doing a great job. You want to prove that. Why let that go, be left to be subjective? So I want to talk about really 4 main benefits that performance reviews and post inspections will really contribute to your company. The first one is that it provides a great environment for your staff and your supervisors to communicate what's expected of the officer. So if you don't have something like this in place, you get one shot, and it's when you onboard that officer, right? So you're trusting that in the first training period. So whatever your training process is, if you don't have regular post inspections or performance reviews, you're relying on getting everything right in that first meeting. Because if you don't, the officer's performance is going to slip or be off. He's going to think he's doing a good job, not doing the right job. And so you've got to have something in place to where you can come back and review, are you hitting the expectations for our client?
Yeah, in addition to, John, and even when the guard, the first thing the officer is going to do when he gets on and he gets questioned about his work, he's going to say, well, I wasn't trained properly, right? So you have to have that all set up way in advance, like I said. So if you're a supervisor in the field, you need to make sure that you have all the tools that show that you met and you completed the inspections with the officers. You showed them everything. So and they have those documents, but it's a big part of it too, because if you got a bunch of people coming back saying I wasn't trained properly, and they're all speaking the same language, you're going to be looked at as a supervisor.
Well, Silvertrack Nation, let's take a break and hear from our sponsors over at Paperless Proposal. If you want to give your company a strong competitive advantage when prospective clients view your business proposals, use Paperless Proposal software to create visually stunning multimedia proposals. When you submit a multimedia proposal to a prospective client, you instantly create a personal connection with the people who view your proposal through the use of video clips that can be both pre-recorded or recorded directly from your webcam. Video allows you to present your company in a far more effective manner than using a dull text or PDF document, which is what your competitors will probably be using. Visit paperlessproposal.com/Silvertrack to take advantage of a special offer just for our listeners. Now, let's get back to our featured conversation.
Reason number 2 that you need to be doing performance reviews and post inspections is that it helps you identify training needs, because it's going to be different site by site and officer by officer. You need to have a pulse on what's the officer currently capable of doing and where do I need him to be to meet our customer standards, and how am I going to improve that, right? Do we need to improve their report writing skills? Do we need to make sure that they're actually moving around? Or, Chris, do we need to make sure they have a flashlight on the property, right? Like just little things like that. I mean, we hear, small stories that if we aren't, or on a consistent basis, we hear things that there's a lack of, if you're not doing the performance reviews or the post inspections, you aren't going to understand the gap between what your customer is expecting and what your officers are actually delivering, and eventually the contract's going to run out or you're going to be terminated because that gap can't exist for very long. The market's too competitive.
Yep, and you got to keep on your performance expectation. It's not just contract and or how's the team overall doing. You should be focusing on the individual himself, his personality, his traits, his strong points, his weak points, because he's going to eventually either leave that post or you're going to need to put him at another location, right? And you got to know everything about him. So a good supervisor understands his line staff and what their capabilities are, what their weak points, strong points. So he's already thinking ahead, right?
Yeah.
Constantly. And then providing whatever training, as we talked about, in advance, right, to strengthen their points, because if he does, it makes his job easier at the same time.
And so the third opportunity or real benefit that the doing performance reviews delivers to your company, and this is more towards the owners, is this helps you understand how well your supervisors are doing. When you're talking about, when you see the performance reviews that come from the managers in your south office versus the managers in your east office or the north, whatever satellite offices you have, or even just different divisions of the operation, when you get the performance reviews for their area of management, you can tell and you can understand how well you need to equip your managers to be able to then turn around and train their staff. Do they have the ability to source and to find quality officers for their posts? Is that the biggest problem? Or are they just not, is their management style really not a good fit? So if you're not doing these type of things, it's all left to subjective. How are we feeling? Does it feel like they're doing a good job? Does it feel like we're losing a lot of contracts? Does it feel like we're getting, attracting quality officers? You don't want to rely on that. And you can't rely on that if you're going to grow to a 300, 500,000 guard company.
Yeah. I think, not Gary, but Bob, right, from Quantec, talked about this in his lecture too. And how many guard companies were out there struggling for people? I was totally amazed in that lecture. How many people could not get good quality people. So, if anything you can do to encourage and train and keep the people you have is really critical, turn and burn.
Funny backstory. So Chris and I in October, and a few other members from Silvertrack's team were down at the Cal Saga conference, which is like a statewide association that helps equip and resource security companies in California. So there's several keynotes lined up, and for the most part throughout the weekend, pretty just a one-way road. So the keynote speaker gets up there and they're just conveying information. It's not too interactive. Well, Bob from Quantec, which is a HR hiring software, helps manage the hiring process, did his keynote and made it a little bit more interactive. And Chris, normally in a big group, like people are kind of scared to raise their hand. And I was surprised people were like having conversations like this is such a big problem, finding quality officers and retaining quality officers, that people were raising their hands in front of 100 plus 150 plus people asking questions. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So hopefully we're going to get Bob on and to share a little bit more about that. But I guess I thought that was pretty interesting that it is that, so quality officers, when you have quality officers, or even the lack of quality officers, should be another point under why we should be doing performance reviews, because they are few and far between. So we want to make sure we're not employing the bad ones, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So the fourth opportunity and really benefit to doing performance reviews and post inspections would be that it helps you determine compensation and any type of position change. So ideally, especially for management positions, you hire from within. It's nice to have someone that understands the company culture. Of course, you're not going to hire a security officer to become your new head of accounting, but you're probably you want to source your supervisor positions, your operations, your management positions with people who understand how the company works. They've been up through the ranks, and you really can't make a objective and an informed decision unless you are doing some sort of performance review or even post inspection. So I think, it goes without saying now that if you fail to do this, the information that you have to base your decisions on becomes pretty,
And here's a fine example, okay? Here's the example. So you got some great accounts out there, right? Got some good accounts that are real cushy jobs, and right, you got a lot of people attention. You got ones where you're looking at a ditch all night, right? No interaction, right? Hate to say it, but they pay well, some of them, to do that, right? Because they realize it's a tough position. So what do? Do you keep your employee that's been with you for a year, that's been dedicated to you, in the ditch, or do you give them the opportunity to move? Right?
Yeah.
So you need to be able to take a look at your contracts across the board. And just like you said, you got to understand those position changes. So when somebody new comes in, make him prove himself. Just because the guy look good, smells good, and walk in the door, and you need employees real bad, don't just put him in the best job right up. Make him work. See if he's gonna be able to show up at work. Put him in that ditch for a week and get the other guy out of there and put him in a better spot. So you got to think of those things, because your other guards talk when they find out you put the prima donna somewhere in the best position. You're still working the ditch. What's that make you think?
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
So just something to throw out.
So we cover this subject and actually give a lot of really actionable tools in our newest ebook on evaluating security officer performance. That's available at silvertracksoftware.com/resources. And there's also a link to that in our show notes at silvertracksoftware.com/89 for episode number 89, where you can view a full article on everything that we just talked about. Feel free to share this with your colleagues, friends, family, anyone else in the industry who you really feel like would benefit from hearing this episode. And then check out that ebook. It's quite a bit of information, hopefully in a way that you can read it and put it into practice for your business. So Chris, anything else to add before we wrap up episode 89?
No, we're good. 89. Let's get to 90.
Let's get to 90. And that leaves us at, my name's Johnny Page.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
This was SilverTrack Software. This was episode number 89, and we will talk to you on episode 90.